Christopher Stapleton, and creative venture catalyst. Instead of venture capitalist, I kind of work with ideas and then money. Money comes later. You have to have that idea. And I'm a small firm that works within bigger firms to help catalyze innovation, to see things differently, really look at experiences and making memories. And I'm pioneering what I call experiential media, and I'll explain that later. And the reason why I titled Design as if your life depended upon it, it's kind of a life-threatening title for a conference called Delight, and which is kind of strange. But I wanted to especially emphasize, I work in experiential entertainment. And like Delight, a lot of people think that's just a sugarcoating. And delight is something that is the essence of what we are and how we relate and where things come from. And that's at the core. And when I talk about entertainment, I talk about delight. When I talk about story, playing game, I'm talking about delight. And that's internal. It's an origin of many things and reasons why we do things. And so what I found in the huge mega budgets I've had to work with, it's the smallest moments that make the biggest memories. And it's really important. And when I look at experiential media and figure out how I can save a life, transform a life, prepare a life, enhance a life, all these things I could do because I saw the power of entertainment. But I saw it more in the power as a means versus an end. And that's really where my research is after a lot of work I do. And so I work with helping people whose users put their lives in their hands. So surgeons, soldiers, teachers, therapists, their work is a matter of life and death. So my work is a matter of life and death. But thank God they aren't in my hands because they'll probably die. But I make the creative leaps to do what they shouldn't, wouldn't, or couldn't. And I create experiences that they shouldn't, wouldn't, or couldn't so they know what it is to be like crossing the line. So they never cross that line. And so my background is from New York City. I went to school at NYU, conventions, conferences, Broadway theater, film and television. I started working with interactive computer graphics with IBM in the middle of the 80s. And this is the first time IBM started to say, wow, I can sell a computer using a computer. Wow. And that interactive computer graphics on the PC was a whole new paradigm shift for IBM. And that started to make me think about all the other media I did. All the other media was in boxes. The theater stage, the screen stage, the television stage. Everything was a little presentation of this little box. And I, with the interactive computer graphics, is saying, I can bring people into this world, bring them into that box, immerse them, make it so that I can interact with media like I interact with the everyday world, experiential, to participate. So going from presentation to participation was an important kind of aspect. Oops, wrong button. So then I went into experiential entertainment, making mega theme parks during the 90s with a lot of different brands that want the next best thing. I had on budget and schedule create something that had never been done before, that puts people at the edge of the death, actually, or thinking that they're in death, but they are, but they're perfectly safe. And designing roller coasters or anything, but it worked with all their different worlds. And simultaneously, I would work in laboratories off to the side, working in virtual reality since the early 90s, and really seeing this power of crossing what I call the virtuality continuum. That's a term Milgram talked about with mixed reality, is that there isn't just a virtual reality. There's a whole spectrum from all reality to all virtuality. And then it goes into what I call the imaginality, which is the reality that controls all other realities. And let me explain. So one of the things about reality and virtual reality is that it's been around forever, before us. If you take a look at this picture, and there's a reality of the mountains and the virtuality of the reflection. I can have an experience climbing that mountain, but if I wanted to climb the mountain in the reflection, I would only could use my imagination to do that. That's what it's like to experiencing media versus experiential media. And this is a big differentiation because we're still making that jump that we need to go and be immersed. It's much like Alice going down the rabbit hole. But what if Alice couldn't go through that rabbit hole and had to look through the hole outside? That's like looking in the lake, imagining. She wants to go in. We want her to go in. We want to go in with her. In her shoes. And when we look at virtuality, we look at it as a separate thing. as a thing unto itself. William Gibson talked about cyberspace as a consensual hallucination. It really is, in order for virtuality to actually work, we need reality and what I call imaginality to make it work. The reality is I'm still sensing with my real senses. I still have gravity under my feet, even though I have these goggles on in virtual reality. But my imagination, my cognition is making sense of it, is making it relate, making me cry, laugh, scared. And so it's a matter of this virtuality continuum that sees the reality, virtuality, and imaginality as one world, not separate worlds. And that's where we talk about experiential media. So how do you get control over these three worlds? And one of the things that I've been able to do is work in a lot of different areas. Work with play, where I use toys to engage people physically in the hands, and work with games and strategy and escalate their involvement and investment, and work with story to capture their heart and bring that in. The problem with this is those are three different entertainment industries that work completely separate from each other. They didn't work together. Every time I had a job working in one industry, for gamers, everything's a game. For a story, everything's a story. No, you don't make interactive stories, etc. And toys, it's all free play. You don't construct anything. And so in reality, they're all interrelated, but they're all distinct. And it's that thing that, in working in all these areas and bringing it to the lab, I realized this is the medium and convention to work with what I call experiential media. And this is looking at comparing experiencing media versus experiential media. We have reality, virtuality, and imaginality. A book is mostly imagination. Ernest Hemingway said that I only write 1/8 of the story experience. The 7/8 the reader comes with. They read beyond the page. And that's what the magic of good writing is what you don't write and stimulate the imagination of the reader. But we sit in a chair by the fire and we kind of get the reality of where we are pacified. We wanted to put it to sleep while we exclude senses to accentuate the only senses that work. Same thing happened with film. When you watch a film, the theater design is as important as the movie to be able to transport you, to take you away. But it increases the level of virtuality and leaves less to the imagination, but still dumbs down or numbs out the rest of the perceptual senses. Where game is interactive, it's inherently physical, it starts to kind of get them involved, but the problem is that you get removed out of that window that you got projected in with film. And then suddenly that screen becomes too small. And that's why Oculus Rift is real important for gamers, is that once I'm interactivity, I'm physical, I'm outside the screen, but I want to be inside the screen, and it's a problem. And with theme parks, it's great because you do get in there, you surpass a lot of times, more than 30 minutes, a whole week, with your whole family, with all senses, all dimensions, all directions, and all realities at once. And that's what experiencing is. But the reality is, to make that work, is you have to work with story flow, game flow, and play flow all together, woven together, but respect each one of them. And that's very challenging because the industry tends to be very separate. And when you look at the different ranges of experience, from passive, engaging, active, reactive, interactive, experiential, you start to look at the role of the audience. First, you just have to absorb, then to think and feel, to then participate, but then to make choices. But some of that reactive interaction is just making choices already been produced by the creator. Interactivity really is when I can contribute as an audience. And once I contribute, it's truly interactive. But then I want to get to the experiential part. I want to be totally immersed. Experiencing media usually works with just two realities in two senses, in two dimensions. In reality, we want to work with all the senses, all the dimensions and directions. When you look at dimensional field of view, there's many different ways you can get information from different channels. And DARPA's research is that when you use all senses all at once, you increase your working memory by 3 times, which is really critical. So in this experiential media, we're trying to look at people changing a paradigm of understanding that full experience with anything. Even with a cell phone, you can look at it as experiential media. Not as a screen, not even as a window, but look at it like a magic wand, and look at the context of the physical environment around you. And these are some of the tools we use to really kind of help get people to the other side before really experimenting with creative leaps. I start with a real-world laboratory, and this is one of the things that I really need for innovation, is bring the academic, civic, and commercial together to really look at playing with the technology. I call it the technological playground of ideas and dreams. An area that we can just explore and not know where we're going, but just kind of play around and invite people from different industries. Worked a lot, I have a lot of publications on a lot of this stuff if you want to look in more detail, but looking at the experiential media design research, understanding they've already invented the technology, they already have the methodology, but putting that together changes how they do things, and making that path is very difficult for a lot of professionals because they're so rooted into the traditional change. And then that has to be outside of the working environment because they can make mistakes, because the real world doesn't tolerate mistakes. They don't, and that's real critical. We tell each other to make mistakes and fail, but they really don't have tolerance. So you have to kind of have a safe zone to do that, but we have to get it into the physical world to have this conversation. So we would take some of this technology of mixed reality that you saw in the goggles and put it into a portal so that a group can use it and put it into a museum. And we asked the CEO of the museum and said, what's your problem? What can we solve? What can we help? He says, I have this room full of dinosaurs. Every science museum has to have dinosaurs, but the people come in and walk out. They don't engage. And there's nothing to do. And they know Jurassic Park. They want these bones to come alive. And so they don't have enough money to redo it. So this use of experiential makeovers really takes what they already has and enhances it. Instead of having to throw everything out, there's a lot of things that are very valuable in this world. And so what we did is a very small footprint, put this portal, was to capture the exhibit and embed it with virtual, and flooded it with water, brought the dinosaurs alive, gave them a little vehicle to operate within this environment. And so before, when we started to extract data from that, we had virtual docents, and now we had this whole nother area, portal, to work through. Kids, instead of coming in and out in 3 to 5 minutes, being bored, they were staying 5, 10, 15 minutes, and it was the parents that were saying, oh, let's go, and not the kids. So this really changed things around. This was worked with basically off-the-shelf technology. Nothing too advanced, but the advancement was looking at a different paradigm. Same thing happened when we were working with Brand Experience Laboratory in New York with MGM and looking at how they did experiential marketing. They had display, they had posters, they have all these products, all these brands, how did they do it together? So we're looking at, could we have an experiential movie trailer that kind of combined that? You feel like a film, you play it like a game, but you immerse your whole family like a theme park. Can you do that all at once in the mall as you're walking by doing other things? And so we developed this experience that we're able to look at all the media together and converge in different ways. And this really opened up this area of this casual entertainment and marketing and really having impact on people and drawing them in, but really looking at that whole group of different ages, different genders, different interests, and what Disney calls swimmer, divers, and waders. We have different interests in interactivity. We could deal with all those different levels at once. And so that's really one of the things that we really draw away from, is it's not one size fits all. We can have one that adapts to a lot of different experiences. And some they may want to look at a car as an entertainment, some as a design feature, some as performance, and we could all address to all those different areas. And so what we wanted to do is apply that to education and museums. And the museums, they had a problem with the hit and run syndrome. They push a button, see data. And their museums are trying to teach knowledge and not skills. So we're working with NASA to look at, how do you teach innovation skills? Innovation skills are like team building, creative problem solving. These are very ambiguous things to do and sometimes very frustrating. And we have to learn these skills, it takes effort. We wanted education to be achieved, not consumed like entertainment, but use everything entertainment has going for it. And so we brought social media, virtual games, immersed it like a theme park, and to see what things people would do, how they would do. And we went through several different iterations, and we found a really big challenge. When we had, is that 10 to go? Okay. So when we had, So when we had these people in there, when we had a video game on there, people would be sucked into that video game, and their presence would be in the virtual reality, not in the physical reality. But their favorite thing was to work with physical objects. But they were like one-trick ponies. It's just a matter of you did it, and they didn't do anything else. And we needed both that virtual and that real. And that social interaction was real important too, because when we were able to get, we did focus groups afterwards, and we asked, well, what experience was most frustrating? And they say, oh, that one over there. And then we'll ask, which one was the most fun? And they'll say, oh, that one over there. Same one, frustrating and fun. So in doing ease of use, we were kind of killing the fun. When we were doing keeping it simple, stupid, we got bored. And so we really had to look at this sweet spot between bored and frustrated to get that fun aspect. And that had certain aspects of bringing real, virtual, and social together, which is where we got to our next achievement to try to look at the interface completely different. The interface doesn't work for what my purpose is on experiential media. It takes you away from your body, your environment, and your area. The kids love to be physical, working in the puddle. You didn't have to have instructions working in a puddle or a pile of sand. It's all intuitive. Very complex things, but intuitive, not simple. And then we were able to have things that you fidget with to kind of put together, and put together wrong, just to see what it was. So you know what worked was by knowing what didn't work. And that creative problem solving was frustrating and ambiguous, but fun. And so I want things to be hard and ambiguous. And then the physical stuff was a little bit one-trick pony. The simulation gave it dynamics. So we had to really kind of put the physical, the fidgeting, and the digital together. And so what we have, what we call is phygital. And so we embodied a physical project with virtuality. But this interface was still giving us a problem because the kids were sucking face with it. And they were their presence was in the virtual world. And so we had to bring that out with the object and the virtuality. But also by using multiple screens, they didn't go into any one screen. And then we were able to kind of get an environment, much like that car before, is a family circled around over a physical, virtual, imaginable object. And that was the area that we saw the most progress in, but we had to make it more than just a board game. So we had it, instead of an interface, this interspace between media and people, which is really important. In the here and now, with the flesh and blood, and trying to take the infinite imagination of a child and the infinite story of knowledge and try to shove it through a GUI. Is very frustrating, and I think that we need to kind of pull away from that and see that as a portal within our worlds and look at this peripheral aspect of the social interaction, the virtual action, and use every one of the senses. Every one of the senses gives us something different. The visual is our dominant focal perception, but our dominant peripheral perception is audio. We can hear through walls, hear around corners, and hearing is only 360-degree sense. Haptic is your only two-way sense. Olfactory is your only sense that's directed directly to the emotions. All these have a purpose. All these have a memory. All these have a function. And we need to work with them simultaneously. It's complex, but it's intuitive. More intuitive than the GUI. And then we can bring in virtual people, virtual ideas, docents, and we had social networks connected up to the different stations to see how they would work as a group automatically. And so this was a really interesting dynamic that we wanted to really kind of explore more. So this visual interspace had a portal that virtual characters came in, the vigils in a simulation table that they all could interact with. And this is kind of an example of one of the prototypes that we did. So that was the biologist, the steampunk biologist, totally fictional. We were teaching science through science fiction, really. Teaching the truth with a lie. But he was locked in the mirror in time, and he was mixing these concoctions that would end up into these vials. And then we grabbed them and put them into this vernal pool to see these creatures that he's created that are fictional, to see what would happen. And it was just a fun, playful kind of interaction, but it did different things. Then we made our prototype. A prototype is just to kind of work the idea out, to get people's ideas before we actually make something that works. And this was the prototype that we put in our what we call storefront laboratory, because we wanted to bring people right off the street and get the reaction. In a real world laboratory, we have to be in the real world. We have to have this day-to-day conversation with the user constantly, and it's always evolving. And so we put this curio cabinet that had these different phygital interspaces in them, and we just kind of told people, come in, this was delivered, we don't know what it is, can you figure it out for us? No instructions, no goals, none of those things that you usually look at in designing education. But it was designed within the area. And what we wanted to give them is an idea of a practice of looking at the scientific process, that usually you're taught what they are, brought through each level, and in the GUI you get to one stage to the next stage by giving them nothing except a really interesting, designed, dynamic, engaging social aspect They went through each one of those scientific process stages on their own, intuitively, as they wanted to. And so this was really interesting as far as how that went, and that goes straight into the educational aspect. We started applying it to traumatic brain injury, where we had to teach someone with no working memory how to make breakfast. How do you teach someone who can't remember anything? It's very odd. So what we worked with mixed realities, we were able to capture the man's kitchen and bring it into the clinic because he couldn't remember on a new kitchen, put it into a green screen where we had the virtuality of the physical, so you hear and feel the cabinet, and you could use real appliances. You can smell the coffee, taste the bagel, feel the cold and the heat of the appliances. All these senses had a certain memory that his mind was finding new pathways to do something as simple as making breakfast.
Simulators are used to help train pilots, soldiers, even design video games. But right now, UCF is testing a unique collaboration of simulation science and medical research. Rush 2's Dr. Pat Husky reports the virtual therapy is helping brain injury patients take part of their lives back.
Where do we keep the cereal?
I don't know. A frustrated Blaine Smith is trying to remember things he's done his whole life, like how to make breakfast.
Tell me, what do you need for a bowl of cereal?
He's hoping these goggles can help him get back his short-term memory, destroyed by a recent brain aneurysm.
Oh, man. Great day.
And he's getting help from the folks at UCF's Institute for Simulation. They've created this virtual computer program of Blaine's own kitchen.
What Blaine sees when he walks into his kitchen is a real kitchen. He's got a stove over here, a refrigerator, countertops. He can even sit at his table and look out at his neighbor's house. He's got everything that a typical kitchen has, even silverware.
So we combined that real and physical, and we had amazing aspects of what happened, but it wasn't because of what we saw or how we designed the experiment. Because we had to simulate the real and the virtual together and register and sense them, we said if we can simulate an experience, we can also capture it. With that capture, we get data, we get meaning, and we start to understand it. And so we tracked his head position orientation and drew a little line here, a little squiggle. And immediately the therapist started to look at this squiggle and say, that's frustration. Oh, this squiggle's disorientation. Just this quick kind of rendering of this data, there's immediate aspect of transferring their 40 years of experience to a squiggle. And to be able to look at how that transferred and why it transferred. And it wasn't until we looked back at the data that we didn't think to collect, but we collected it anyway, that we saw the real insight as far as how to transfer what he knew, how he knew it, and how he did it. And that happens also with soldiers and surgeons. And this is how we started to really realize how we simulate can also how we capture and how we can measure and create what we call a human experience modeler. It's redefining how we measure, how we bring meaning to measure, and how we take expertise and translate it to knowledge that transfers to novices. And it's really dynamic because before, a soldier was only evaluated a hit and miss, did you do it right or wrong? But there's a million ways you can die on a courtyard in an urban terrain, a military urban terrain. In this way, we could catch that. And this aspect of story, play, and game, working with the educational grounded theories of learning, we saw that it also worked with training and how a surgeon and a doctor work automatically as far as bringing this mental model, this data visualization, and these tools together as one world and really kind of bringing that into their own lives. And that became a design tool itself. So that we could capture what was happening in the factory, bring it into the lab, see what was going on with real users. Oh, thanks. Blessing. And then work that into the design and then the training. So when the factory piece came back in there, new and improved, they didn't lose any downtime. But now, still in industry, enterprise-wise, they're putting more equipment in that hasn't been tested like this, that really don't know whether it's going to really work as they expected until it already gets installed and it fails. And so this gave Design Interactive a way to work with what we call a prototype, to really kind of start to see the whole people in the product life cycle or the innovation life cycle to see the importance. And we applied it to aphasia therapy too.
You're robbed of the essence of who you are. Aphasia is a loss of language due to some type of a brain injury, usually stroke, but it can be disease, it can be trauma, it can be a tumor. Story is so critical to what we do as a speech-language pathologist. And I think when we take story out of what we do, all it is drill and practice. And in the midst of that, like you said, if the therapist is in there with you, I can be feeding you some language to augment, to help you.
Right.
But you're telling the story. It's your story. I don't believe virtual reality can do that because I believe the element of relationship isn't there. And I believe that for the person with aphasia, that interconnection with another human being is extremely important for them.
It's really cool.
It is
It's
cool,
really
isn't
cool
it?
to see, because you can see behind you, there's really cool stuff back there.
What is behind there? What are you seeing?
I see you, and I see where a lot of the trees and snapgrass
Okay.
right there, and a couple of, here's a big one, a really nice big one.
But think how much more enriching it is if it's connected to a story, and particularly your story, what you want to be talking about. Then those 20 words are your words, and it's telling your story. Let's say you put on that head mounting device, and it was as if you were at a construction scene.
Right. Yeah.
So what's really important is that this story with therapy was never thought of before. They went with a very scientific, analytical way of trying to teach you words that you already know, you just can't speak. Aphasia is this loss, this brain damage. And what we're trying to do is looking at their typical system and adding this creativity and expression to language. And being able to find things that, in that guy that you were hearing, wasn't able to bring out a whole sentence. And now the fact that he could say a whole sentence, and he's a lawyer, and there's doctors, and these people have all this knowledge being able to communicate. And so what we want to do with this immersion in experiential media that's coming to the living room with things like Oculus Rift and Facebook is really to understand how to make every living room this lifelong learning landscape. And that's where I'm working with and really kind of pushing this media to being fully experiential and making memories for a lifetime. Thank you.